Hey boaters, this is Keith McGowan, the Outboard Dad, here to help you have a better boating experience. Today, I want to talk about a video that I did about a week ago that talked about top outboard motors to avoid and why. So there were some common themes through what I talked about there, and I got a lot of really interesting comments back from people who have experience with different outboard motors. So to me, the most important thing is that experience. So please like, subscribe, send me any comments that you have, and let's continue on with this conversation. So one of the interesting things that I have is a couple of themes throughout some of the notes I took from those comments. I tried to answer almost everybody that I could, but Jeff said to avoid anything made in the last 20 years. Now it's pretty interesting because I have other people who say they have newer motors and they've got 1,000 hours on them and they love them. So now if Jeff has had one of those motors, the newer motors, and maybe it failed on him, maybe he had a bad experience. So that's what we want to talk about. What are the differences? He also says that the four-strokes are garbage, they're money pits, they have too much technology just to spin a propeller, and it shouldn't need that much. Truly here, he's a two-stroke fan. The simplicity of the two-stroke, I get it. And that's why I rebuild these motors, because it's less parts to deal with. They're so much simpler, and I do respect that, Jeff, and I do respect that that is simpler. But that doesn't mean that these other motors, like the four-strokes here, or some of the newer fuel-injected two-stroke motors, it's interesting to see the contrast, right? So what he talks about is he has Johnson Evinrude motors from the 70s that still run strong. And they have plenty of used parts that are out there that you can find them. So he gave me all the points of the reasons why he liked that, because this is his experience. I also started with a Johnson Evinrude motor. I had a 85 horse, 4-cylinder V4 cross-flow motor, as they're known. And I had it for 17 years. It ran great. The only challenge that I had with it is when I was young one time, I goofed and put 6 ounces per every 6 gallons instead of 16 ounces, because that was the mix back then, the 50-to-1 mix. And I did it once or twice. I know I goofed, and I caught it and kept running it, but little by little, it got slower and slower and lost compression and had some scored cylinder walls. So it's my fault, but it still ran. The other thing that Jeff brings up and that I appreciate about some of these older motors is I don't need a battery to start it. So if I'm stuck out on the water and my battery's dead, I can wrap a rope around the flywheel, pull it over. Now it's going to be tough to pull over a 2-stroke 4- or 6-cylinder motor, but if you get a couple buddies there, you probably can get that thing running and get back home, which is key. So interesting. Another gentleman says he's been a boater for 45 years and feels the newer motors are more reliable. Current motors that he has on his boat right now have 700 hours on them, 4-stroke Yamaha motors. Didn't say the size, but they were also well maintained and have better fuel economy and no smoke. So of course there's positives to that as well. There's positives and negatives to both of those. So another one says, I have over 5,000 hours on my Tohatsu MFS 40 motors, and I have over 1,000 hours on a 50 horsepower Tohatsu motor. And it's never missed a beat. But I will never go back to 2 strokes again. So interestingly enough, he also mentions he does the maintenance and he does it himself. I'll bet you Jeff does all of his own maintenance and repair on his 70s motors as well. So another gentleman said, I love the Yamaha OX66. We got one back here behind me. They're excellent 2-stroke motors and they're awesome. As long as you take care of them the right way, they will take care of you. Another gentleman chimes in and says he likes the old Kickofer and OMC motors and even a Chrysler that he has from the 70s that are still running. And then another gentleman chimes in about his Optimax. He says I've had my Optimax now, 2004 Optimax, running for so many years that I haven't had a lick of problem with it, and it's been the best motor I've ever owned. He also states that he has a really good marina with a mechanic that he trusts who's been taking care of him for that long since he bought the boat. Another guy, Wayne, says, I have a 97 Mercury, 175 horsepower electronic fuel injection motor, and It has been well maintained and runs strong every day I get out there and use it. He said, I'm not sure of the hours, but it's got to be over 3,000 hours that he's had this motor since brand new. Another gentleman says, the reason the OMC Ficht motors failed is because in the first 18 months they had oil pump issues and it ruined the blocks, so the factory wanted all the engine blocks sent back to the factory to be reworked. And unfortunately, in that first 18 months, they didn't fix the problem. They just gave guys rebuilds and were churning out blocks. But unfortunately, they did fix it in the long run. But unfortunately, their reputation was hurt so bad that people just stopped buying, and that's why they went out of business. So interesting story behind that. The only motor that he suggests you avoid is the Suzuki DT2s, which are the two-stroke Suzukis. And he said not because they're a bad motor, but because finding parts is getting tougher and tougher for those motors. He's had one on his boat for 10 years and is just looking to move on from it the next time it has a problem. So again, there's reasons why behind these people have their opinions, which is really, I find very interesting and more factual than someone just saying, don't buy this, don't buy that, they were garbage. Well, I want to know why and what happened. So Barry says the only one that he would avoid is the old McCullough motors. Now we're really going back because they made chainsaws and everything, and they went through head gaskets and really didn't last very long. Another gentleman says avoid the OMCs with VRO pumps. So the VRO pump is actually on this V6 over here, the 150 horsepower motor. That one's a 60-degree motor, but they use that VRO pump on their cross flows and on their looper motors. Some of you guys who have those motors understand those motors. They ran great, but they had issues with those VRO pumps. Again, if they were not maintained, or if you had ethanol in the fuel and you weren't treating your fuel, you had an off mix and then it didn't work properly. Remember, VRO is to vary ratio oil injection, right? So it's variable ratio. So as you speed up, it adds more oil to it, but as you slow down the RPM, it doesn't need as much. It's a little bit more efficient. So if that fails, and a lot of guys just like to mix, they'll do the 50-to-1 and they'll run it like that. Yeah, it'll smoke a little more, you know, when it's idling or when you're putt-putting around or when you first fire it up to take it out. I had a couple of Yamaha 115s on a Wellcraft one time. They were 1991 motors. And sure, you choke it, they fire right up every time, but yeah, you get that waft of smoke if the wind's going the right way, and it stinks. And that's why when you get a 4-stroke and you fire it up and you don't have that, it's so nice. They run quieter, and that's why I understand why people would want those as well. Lazy Bones chimed in and said, I have a 94 200 horsepower carbureted Merc, and I would never buy another motor. I've already rebuilt it once. Why? Because I ran over a big hunk of crap in the water. He got some clogging in there and he stopped peeing and his alarm failed. So he didn't have a working alarm. He got that working. That's the last time that happened. Rebuilt that same motor and he's back out on the water again. So pretty interesting. He also mentions that he has a 2001 Ficht motor that he's been running all this time, and it actually uses less fuel than his carbureted Mercury motor. Because remember, that Ficht motor was a fuel-injected motor and actually was the precursor to the E-Tech engine, which was pretty well taken for many years. I know there's still some opinions out there, but that was a much better motor than the original Ficht motors that came out. So another guy, Charlie, chimes in about 7 Marine. I mentioned about 7 Marine as well. So he says that Volvo bought them and killed them. Now, he doesn't say why. From what I've done in some of my research, they kind of pushed a different direction with those motors and dropped the horsepower, and sales got lost, so they just kind of dropped that division, is what I have heard. Again, let me know what you understand. So a couple common themes throughout all of the comments that I got. Maintenance. As long as maintenance is taken care of. One gentleman, Robert, says, there's no bad motors, just bad owners. And it's interesting, you'll hear in Karate Kid, right? It's one of my favorite movies when I was younger. No bad student, just a bad teacher, right? So interesting stuff. And, you know, when we apply these things, what really was done to these motors? We really don't know. And that's why I promote my Outboard Motor Buying Guide. It's going to be for sale on Amazon soon. and I'm going to offer an extra 15 minutes of phone call time if you're buying a boat with an outboard, that I can give you a little consultation. But to have a guide so you understand what you're buying and the test you can do, it doesn't mean you're going to get a perfect motor. It just means you're going to have more confidence in what you're buying. And that's what's key. So you have more confidence in what you're getting out there on the water if you've done the water pump, if you've done the thermostats, if you've done the zincs. This Suzuki motor here that has a head failure. Now, is it the head or is it the block? I don't know yet, but water got in the engine. So if I pull out one of those zincs, I'll bet you know what, I'll pull one out. I started to pull one out before and I started to loosen up and got distracted and didn't pull it out all the way. But let's see what the zinc looks like inside this motor real quick. Just got to get a screwdriver to pry it out the rest of the way. And there you have it. So if I'm not mistaken, this is a 2004, 2006 motor, something like that. And that zinc obviously has never been changed. I wonder if it would have kept running had the basic maintenance been done to it. I didn't pull out all the zincs. I just started to pull that one, got it the rest of the way out. So that's the common theme that I'm finding from people who've owned boats, some of them 40 plus years that they've been out there running some of the same motors, some 20 years on one motor, 30 on another. So that's the key, is understanding from those people, those real life situations where people have run those for many, many years. So that's what I look for, and that's what I try to learn from as much as I can and share with other people. And of course, you know, I got a few comments. There's one gentleman that said, never buy anything that's Evinrude or Johnson. They're all garbage. You know, again, I got no other information from that. Some people wrote some more details, some did not. And then I also had a gentleman that said, never buy the Yamaha HPDI motor. He had nothing but problems with his and got rid of it and moved on to a Suzuki 4-stroke. Now again, we don't know, was the due diligence done when they bought these motors? Did they go through everything? Some of these motors sit for a period of time. Like this 250 horse Yamaha back here has a VST on it, right? This motor here is going to be fuel injected. It's going to have a higher pressure fuel pump. If fuel sits in these for a period of time and doesn't get cleaned out, maybe it just sat for a year. Maybe it was just 2 years that it sat. And then you'll go out and run it, and now you're leaning cylinders and you're not running properly, not doing the maintenance to them, and that's the detriment to these motors. So my point is, do the maintenance on your motors and do the due diligence before you buy your motors, and you'll have a better boating experience in the long run. Please send me any comments that you have. I love to keep this conversation going. Maybe we'll even do a live cast one time, a podcast, and we'll talk together about the experiences that you guys have had. Again, I appreciate the comments. I love the camaraderie in the community out there who really just want to help each other understand how to have a better boating experience and how to understand your boat and your motor. So please like, subscribe, send me more comments, and we'll see you on the next video. Have a great day.